Hi, and welcome to the ADHD Women and Business Show. I'm Becky.
And I'm Lana.
Hi. And in true ADHD fashion, we're latecomers to the party. Both of us run successful businesses and are exploring how ADHD is probably our superpower. Yay. We can't be the only ones on this journey, and you are welcome to join us as we discover more about ADHD, women, and business. And remember, we are experts in our own experiences, but we're not ADHD experts. Lana helps women in business to implement the right tech at the right time, and I help you implement the sales process that works for you with no sleazy tactics. We don't have all the answers on ADHD, which is why we're sharing our thoughts and discoveries with you. So today's episode, we are delighted to have a guest with us this week. So Lana, would you do the honours and introduce her?
I would love to. And I am delighted to welcome Shannyn Schroeder. So, Shannyn is the F-bomb coach who works with neurodivergent women to calm some of the chaos in their lives by improving their executive function. So, I'm delighted that we'll be talking about executive function today with Shannyn. But before we get into the detail of that, Shannyn, how did you actually get started?
Well, first, let me thank you both very much for having me. I'm excited to be here. My journey in being an executive function coach is a little bit strange. I applied for a job. I'm a teacher, so I've taught, middle school, high school, college English. I was at home with my kids for years. And so I was transitioning, looking for other things. And, I applied to this job as an executive function coach. And I looked at the company and I started really kind of investigating what they did. Basically, it's life skills for students, right? That's that's how they were packaging it. And during that interview process, up until that point, although I do have a master's degree in special ed and in gifted ed, like I know the field. I had never been like trained as an executive function coach kind of thing until I worked for this company. But in listening to everything they did and all the training that they were doing, I'm like, I've been doing this for years. I have 3 neurodivergent kids. So I was doing it, without pay, of course, because, I'm a mom. But I was doing all of these things that now translated into being a coach for, high school and college age students. But my company itself, the F-Bomb Coach Company, is new. New-ish. I've been around for a couple of years. But in recent years, I would say in the last 4 or 5 years, I was seeing so many women, my age, Gen Xers, who are, and I think a lot of it happened with the advent of TikTok and all of the information being shared online, like, oh, that's ADHD. Oh, that's autism. And so you have all of these women who are my age who are like, I think that's me. And they're getting these later in life diagnoses, which is great. You have that sense of relief of like, I'm not totally broken, right? Like there's a reason for this. And once you work through the emotions and the anger and all of that, like, why didn't anybody catch us earlier? Then it's like, well, now what? Like, how does this actually impact my life? And that's why I started F-Bomb Coach, because I wanted to be able to take my knowledge and my skills and my training and make it accessible to lots of women.
Awesome. So
Really
what
cool.
is executive function? Give us
Executive
a simple
function.
answer first, and then we'll get
Yes,
it.
that's what we're going to go for. Executive functioning are, like I said, the life skills. Like when you talk about, like adulting sucks, all of those things that fall under that umbrella of being an adult. Yeah. The things like being on time and organizing your life and planning, all of it, that's your executive function skills.
Yeah. Okay.
And why do they call it that though? Because when I first heard that term, I was just kind of my visual in my head was a boardroom with some very stern people sitting around, and it kind of felt like, oh, I don't know if I actually want executive function skills if it means that it's a bit. So why is it actually called that?
So I don't know the whole history of it, but without getting too technical about the brain, because we're going to talk about the brain a little bit today. most of your executive function skills live in your prefrontal cortex, which is like that front part of your brain. And they control lots of other areas. So before you can, be on time, you have to be able to tap into your prefrontal cortex. And like when you think about an executive is someone who is in charge of things. And so these are the skills that are in charge of you running your life.
That does make some sense, actually. Yeah.
I'm sure there's a more scientific reason for it, but I'm not a scientist.
Yeah. So the F bomb of your business, that's EF. So is that executive function then, or whatever else we want to read into it?
Both. It is. I spell it EF because it is about executive function.
Yeah.
But I am like the way you see me today. Like I'm wearing a sweatshirt and sweatpants. Like I'm not getting dressed up. I'm not wearing makeup. Like you get me as I am, and I do typically drop F-bombs. Like I won't today because I don't want to get you banned on YouTube or anything.
If they slip out,
go for it.
Slip out, that's fine. We normally put some sort of warning somewhere that occasionally something slips out for us too.
And I am in teacher mode, and usually in teacher mode, I'm usually pretty good. But like when I'm just doing my regular blog, or when I'm with my membership group and I'm talking, like you're going to get some F-bombs.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Cool. So give us, I know from my limited knowledge that there's a list of executive functions. I don't know, is it 6 or 7 or something? I can't remember now.
It depends on who you talk to.
Yeah, okay.
So, like some people, like when I talk about them, there's some, like I break some of them up a little bit differently.
Awesome.
So like I work with like 8 skills.
Awesome.
But like I said, some people will say there's 6 and some people will say there's 7 and some, okay. It's about how you approach them and how you break them up and what you group together and what you don't.
Yeah. Tell us about them then, I think is the next question, isn't it? It's like, let's get into some detail because I'm excited to hear from you.
So I'm going to start with emotional regulation. Sometimes it's called self-regulation, being the first one. And that's the ability to manage your emotions, not control them and like pretend they don't exist. But what will happen with a lot of neurodivergent people is that if they are emotionally dysregulated, right? That's like when you see it in a toddler, that's the temper tantrum, where they're flailing around and yelling and screaming and you can't talk to them and they can't even tell you what's wrong, right? It's a total meltdown. We still do that as adults. It looks different. Like we don't lay on the floor and yell and scream. But it could be that total shutdown of like looking around your desk, like, I don't know what anything is, right? And you can't process, you can't do anything. And so I always start with talking about emotional regulation because you truly cannot use any of these other skills until you regulate your emotions, until you manage your emotions. And like a brief little, I said, we're going to talk about brain a little bit. So I mentioned that the prefrontal cortex, and I did this with my hand because there's a hand model. Dr. Dan Siegel created the hand model of the brain. And it's like, if you take your thumb and tuck it in and then fold your fingers over, that's your brain. Okay. That would be like my brain looking at you, like my eyeballs would be over here. And this is your prefrontal cortex. This is where your executive functions are.
Okay.
Underneath this, your thumb that I folded in, that's your amygdala. That is your emotion. That's your emotion center. So what happens, when we teach this to little kids, we're like, oh, when you get really mad and your emotions get out, you flip your lid, right?
Oh my God, that's amazing. Right? Yes.
So like Dan Siegel is brilliant for coming up with that, right? So you flip your lid. Well, what happens when you flip your lid? Your emotions are in control. You cannot access all of these other executive function skills.
No.
So we start with that because if you are feeling overwhelmed, and that's probably the number one word I hear from women when they're talking about their ADHD, and they're like, I'm just so overwhelmed all the time. And that starts with managing your emotions. So once you learn to manage your emotions, and like when you're starting to feel overwhelmed, to have some strategies in place to kind of calm that. And once you do that, then you can start kind of tackling everything else, that you can look at your everything that you need to do, everything that needs to happen, and like, okay, now how can I approach this and make it happen?
You make it sound so simple, Shannyn, and it's actually, it's lovely because I do feel that so many of, like, and I include myself in this, kind of have stages of complete overwhelm. And, I tend to go and clean something. It's a kind of a procrastination as well, but it's almost like I have to go and do that to get myself back to coming to my desk.
Lana, sorry to interrupt. It's called procrastinating.
I
It's
was
a
just going to
thing.
say
Yeah.
that. Yes,
Well,
cleaning
see,
is a
I'm
thing.
learning so many nuggets here.
I am a procrastinator because I don't like to clean, so I procrastinate.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Sorry
Well,
to interrupt.
I've got a new word. I'm really excited now.
Sorry, you were saying though that you're overwhelmed, so you're cleaning. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it does. And here's the thing. It's like, for me, I mean, right now, like, that is your strategy. That is like, I'm feeling that overwhelm. I'm going to go do something else. And as a strategy, is it bad? No, you're getting something clean. So, you're just not being productive on what you should be productive. The problem with that is that oftentimes we do that and you don't look at it and say, well, my kitchen is sparkling and that's pretty kick ass, right? No, you sit there and say, oh my God, I just spent all this time and I didn't do these other 14 things I was to do. And then you're layering on the guilt and that overwhelm comes right back because now you've wasted all of this time. And that's the only problem with, like, when you're doing something like, procrastinating, is that you don't see the good, that you were being productive, not where you wanted to be or where you should have been. But your brain was telling you, I'm out. Right? Like, your brain needed that break to be able to come back. So as long as you're not beating yourself up, if you can come back from that cleaning and say, okay, I got everything in check now, how can I make this happen? And then go at it methodically, that's fine. Like, if that's your go-to strategy, then it works. I mean, if it's working, it's working. I never mess with things. Like, I offer strategies and tools when I'm working with clients. But like, my number one thing is like, no matter what I offer, yes, I want you to try and I want you to experiment, but you have to make it yours. You have to do what works for you and your brain. There is no one size fits all anything.
Yeah.
And anyone who tries to sell you on that's full of baloney.
Well, and particularly on that point, actually, I feel very strongly about that we can see something that works so well for somebody else. And I know that I have become so frustrated and really pissed off with myself for not being able to deploy the same strategy for it to work for me. And it's really frustrating. And I am learning now that, okay, I just need to find a strategy that works for me. And I may have to make some experimental changes to see whether they work for me first. But I try and think of them as experiments when I'm mindful, but most of the time I end up just beating myself up.
And you're not alone. And that's, I wouldn't, like, as far as like the whole executive function journey, and like, I want to improve my executive function skills, because ultimately it is like about calming some of that chaos. Like, you've lived in chaos probably most of your life, and you're just like, that's just the way it is. And now you're realizing, well, maybe there's something I can do about it, right? Because you probably grew up being told, like, oh, well, she's just always late the way she is, or, she can't use a planner. They just don't work for her, right? Whether you say it to yourself or other people are saying it about you. And so you're just like, you've just kind of accepted that as like, that's just the way I am. Yes and no. Yes, that is the way you are, in that your brain functions differently, but it's about finding the strategies that work with your brain, that make your brain happy. So it's not that you can't use a planner or they don't work for you. You haven't found the right planning system for your brain.
That makes total sense.
And it is frustrating, and it's a long journey, and you get more frustrated along the way because you're trying so many different things. But when you find the things that start to work, it's like, whoa, it's like life-changing when you actually experiment enough to find the things that work for you. And then it's like, oh my gosh. And then it really is like an avalanche effect, because then you're like, oh, but now I know how to start tweaking things to make it work for me.
Yeah.
Going back to emotional regulation, that's exactly part of it, isn't it? Is that forgiveness of ourselves and that noticing that how well we've done in one area, even if we haven't done that in the other, and sort of that self-soothing stuff that allows us not to get into that sitting at our desk or whatever and going, "Ah, I just don't know where to start. I
Yeah.
can't start. I don't know what to do." I'm almost like, I'm going to do this instead, which is actually really distracting from what I need to do. And instead being able to go, okay, I'm feeling overwhelmed. What do I need to do next?
Mm-hmm.
And having a plan that
Yes.
works for us to get us into action. Yeah, I like it. Awesome. What's the
So
next
on to the
executive?
next one, which actually is the perfect place to go. You said just about like getting started. That is our next skill, which is task initiation. And task initiation is being able to get started on a task. And it could be any task, but particularly when it's a task that you don't genuinely like, right? Like, because this is one of those things, when people say like, well, isn't everybody a little ADHD? No, right? Because this was, but everybody has a hard time sometimes getting started on a task. Of course, you know what? I'm an English teacher. I hate math. You give me math problems to do, I'm going to procrastinate. I'm not going to want to get started, right? But typically, your neurotypical person can make themselves get started. Yes. Okay, they may bitch and moan all the way through it, but they're going to be able to do it. ADHD people really can't. Like, they will stare at that page literally for hours. Yeah. And they're like, I really got to get this started, but I really don't want to. But I have to. I don't get my homework started, Mom's not going to let me do X, Y, and Z. If I don't write this report for my boss, I'm going to get written up. Like it, and it doesn't sometimes matter what those consequences are. Like, but then again, we get into that cycle of beating yourself up because you're not doing it. So it's about starting to give yourself strategies so that, especially when you're faced with something that you don't like, you have some systems to kind of jumpstart you. But what we find with people with ADHD, the task initiation piece can come in even when it's something that they like. Like, I love knitting, right? Or I like to write, or I like to read. And it's like, I just bought myself a new book. I really want to read it, but then they just can't make themselves get started. And we're talking about something they enjoy. So, most people are like, well, if you enjoy it, then you just do it. And for the ADHD brain in general, there is no just do it unless you slip into hyper focus mode, and then it's do it all the time, right?
Have you got any quick tips as to that task initiation then? Because I know I've sat there in the past and I don't anymore. I've learned enough over the last few years to understand myself better, but I know I felt like I was lazy, even though I knew I was awesome and could do amazing things and have done amazing things. I also felt like I was often lazy because of this whole thing of sitting there for 2 hours on the sofa instead of getting up and putting the washing on, even though I knew I needed to get up and put the washing on. I just couldn't get up, and so yeah.
Absolutely. And you're not alone. Again, like I said, it's absolutely, because all of those feelings, that really nasty voice that's in your head that's always telling you how stupid and lazy you are. That is the external world talking to you like you have a neurotypical brain. Yeah. Because for a neurotypical person, if they're choosing to sit on the couch instead of starting the washing machine, that is like, I don't feel like it. Even if you want to, you sometimes can't make yourself do it. So, like, that's a whole nother process of learning to, tell that voice to shut up, because that voice really doesn't know anything. But my favorite tip for task initiation is what I call the 5-minute rule. In general, any of us can convince ourselves to do almost anything for 5 minutes, because and if 5 is too long, you could go 3. Like, the number's arbitrary, right? It's just, I can make myself do this for 5 minutes, but here's the deal. You have to give yourself that out. If it's something that you hate that much that you do it for 5 minutes, and then when that timer goes off, you're like, okay, this still really does suck. You have to give yourself the right to walk away. I'll come back to it again later. Most of the time, once you do that jump start and like, I've done it for 5 minutes, and then you're like, well, it wasn't that bad. I got it started, and look, I've made progress. Now your brain's like, wait, there was progress. It's looking better than it was. Let's keep going. And a lot of times you can just go ahead and do that. So it really is, but the key is really giving yourself that out. Like when that 5-minute timer goes off, your brain has to know that this is not a trick. This is not mom saying, you know, do 2 more, and you do those 2. And then she's like, no, do 2 more. No, do 2, you know, like not that kind of trick. Like when the timer goes off, if I am still miserable, I'm going to walk away and I'm going to come back for another 5 minutes later on. And even if you have to do it 5 minutes at a time, eventually you will get that task done. There's going to be a finite number of trips, right? So once your brain knows that I really can leave after 5 minutes, but I could suck it up for 5.
That's such a good strategy, because I think part of the overwhelm is when you kind of see it there and it is not going anywhere. And the more you kind of stare it, I kind of try and stare it down, but it doesn't do anything, which is so frustrating.
Right.
So I think just giving yourself that grace almost to say, right, 5 minutes, that's it, and then walk away or go do something else. I think it's just so helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like, well, as we get into some of the other executive function skills, because they all kind of like, you'll see that, like, yes, we're talking about them separately, but once you start doing something, they start to bleed all over each other, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing is like when you have a task and you're looking at it, to be able to break it down into like the smallest component, the smallest steps. Yeah. So if you have to write a paper, step 1 is not do research. Step 1 is opening Google Docs or Microsoft Word. Like most of us don't think about that as being a step, but it really, like, that is a step. So when we're beating ourselves up for not getting enough done, it's like, but if you make a list, and that list, instead of having 3 things, research, write, edit, right? There's way more involved with that. If you start breaking it down into all those micro steps, again, you start checking them off, and that nasty voice is like, that doesn't count. That's not real stuff. It is. And once you train yourself to start looking like that is a real accomplishment. Look, I finished 5 steps, and those 5 steps might have been sit at your desk, turn on your computer, open Google Docs, and give it a title. Yeah. Right? It doesn't like you're starting to mark things off. And for most ADHD brains, like that's a dopamine hit. Look, I got to cross things off my list, and then it makes your brain happy, and then you get to go do more. So like that's the other thing, like when you're looking at something big, to break it down as small as you possibly can.
Yeah, I've smiled because we were literally having a conversation before you joined us about I'm doing exactly that right now. I've realized that I've been looking at something too big, and I've used something called Goblin.
I was just going to say Goblin tools. I recommend it all the time.
It was amazing. I've just typed in what I'm doing. It's given me a list, and then I can tick something and it will break it down even more. And I'm like, this is what I needed, because actually no wonder I'm struggling when there's actually about 50 different steps to take in this one task that I've been thinking I should just be able to do. I'm intelligent enough to do it, but I just can't. And yeah, so brilliant tool. But the smile was because we were literally just talking about it. So awesome. What's the next executive function then?
So the next 2, I think a lot of people group them together. I separate them. So I've got planning and prioritization together, and then time management by itself. Realistically, do they all kind of smush together all the time? Yes. But I do talk about them a little bit separately. So planning and prioritization is about organizing the tasks that you have and then kind of ranking them in order of what is most important and most urgent. Time management then is to being able to look at those tasks, assess how long is something going to take, and then plan for it. See, that's where the planning comes back in anyway, right? Yeah. But because there's so much involved in when you're talking about planning, prioritization, and time management, that's why I kind of break them apart into separate areas. But they do those of all the skills we talk about, they really do overlap all over the place. So when we talk about planning, like, and and I know a lot of people hate hearing this, but you need a planner. Everybody needs to have a planner. I don't care what your planner looks like. This is not the like, oh, you were at school and they handed you an assignment notebook and said, here, use this. And everybody's looked the same. And then you never used it. You never opened it up. And I'm not talking about going and spending $40 to buy a planner and then discover that you hate it. And then you drop another $40.
Yeah.
It's expensive. I know that. You can go online and you can find lots of free templates. You could just Google, planner templates free and just experiment with different layouts. And like some people really like something digital. I'm old, man. I don't use Google Calendar. I hate it. I use it for work sometimes because I have to, but no, like I need a paper planner. I have my paper planner behind me. I'm absolutely a paper planner girl. Like for me, what your planner looks like is going to change through the course of your life. Like when I was a teacher, when I was a student, I needed, that 5 day a week where I can put in my assignments and all things like that. As a full-time teacher, I didn't need so much of a daily planner because I had my lesson plan book. Once I was staying home with kids, I didn't need a daily planner at all. I had a calendar stuck to the wall where I was writing down all of the kids' activities and who needed to go to the doctor and who's going to the dentist and who had football and who had swim, right? But it was something that I could look at the month and put everything on there. When I went back to work and I was working from home, I will tell you that like my life got very chaotic. And every time I'd be like, why am I feeling so out of it? And I'd look at my planner because nothing was written in the damn planner. I wasn't using it. And I'm like, okay, why am I not using it? Because I always use my planner. And it was one of those things where it's like the layout was no longer serving what I needed it to do. And so then it was like, well, I need to have a full month and I need to have my days, but I need my days broken down in hours because I'm taking clients and I schedule meetings. And ultimately it's funny because, I had an Etsy shop and I was like selling like printable planners. And I'm like, why don't I just make my own? Like,
yeah,
sometimes the most obvious answer. So yeah, for the last, 2 years or so, like I created a template for myself and I just print off my own planner every year and it works. But you have to find what works for you because I have a daughter who has ADHD and she takes one look at my planner. She's like, oh, hell no. Like all of the hours written down. But her planner, like she color coordinates things because she makes it pretty and she's got purple for this class. And I'm like, that's too much work for me. I've got another daughter who like for years, who made it through high school. Her planner was an index card, a little like 3x5 index card. She would put her to-dos for the week, fold it in half and stick it in the pocket in her phone. So her planner was always with her, but that's all it was. It was an index card. So it really is about like opening yourself up to find a system that works for you, because you really, unless you can look at everything you have for a month, that's how you're late for things or you miss appointments because you don't have it written down. You cannot rely on your brain to just remember things. It's not going to happen. And once you've got things written down, then you can start to prioritize what things are due first, what things are really urgent. And then once you know what order things have to happen, because if you just stop at making a list, then you convince yourself, I have to get it all done. It's all important. No, everything is not equally important. You need a strategy to figure out what is important now versus, yes, it's all important. Everything needs to get done, right? Laundry is always important, right? Do you get your washing done is always important. Is it really urgent? No, not until you're out of clean underwear. Right? There's a difference. Like you could put it off and you could put it off. Then when there's no clean clothes, okay, now it's urgent. It needs to be done today.
Yeah.
Right.
This is
so it's always important, but
yeah, no, I mean, it really struck me when you were saying that, especially for women in business, because I think sometimes we think we've got to be everywhere all at once, doing everything all at once. We're trying our best to give our clients, our customers, really good service, looking after them. And sometimes I think you've got so many to-do lists and so many perceived priorities that it's no wonder you kind of come out where you feel like your head's exploded. And I feel often women in business, they are primarily nurturing because they want to look after their clients in the best way. And so the question then becomes, are they actually perhaps over prioritizing their client to the detriment of themselves, which means that their cup drains and therefore they burn out. So I'm just wondering what your take is on that.
Absolutely. As women in business, women at home, just women in general, that's part of why I created, while my blog is obviously free for anybody to read, like when I look at my membership, my Facebook group, it's all about women, because it is a unique challenge to be a woman who is neurodivergent, because we do give everything to everyone all the time. And being able to step back, and that's where the prioritization comes in. It's like being able to look at, yes, these things are all important, but how important is it right now? And to get in the habit of not always putting yourself last on that list, because you never get to the bottom of the list, right? You never ever get to the bottom of the list, because there's always more. And being able to prioritize yourself at least some of the time, to be able to do that self-care piece, because the road to burnout is pretty fast, but the road back from it is really, really long.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to get there.
Yeah.
You want to be able to stop it before you get to that burnout level, because then not only are you not serving your clients, you're also not serving yourself or your family or your friends. Like you're just, you're stuck. And
that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's just bad all around. So yeah, that's all part of that prioritization piece, and learning to prioritize not just the tasks, but the other things in your life, like your joy, your happiness, your health. You can't go without sleep because, I have to do these other tasks. I can't go to bed. Now it's 3:00 in the morning and it's okay. I can get by in 2 hours. Okay. You know what? You could do that when you're 20. Okay. I'm 52. I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah, it's much harder, isn't it, as we age, to do some of that stuff, for sure. This is so fascinating. Tell us about the others, so that
Okay.
We don't run too much.
Absolutely. The back end here is a little bit faster, a little bit easier, because they're a little bit more fluid. So next up is organization, and organization is talking about organizing your schedule and your space. So it's not just about, making sure your house is clean. So again, it taps into some of that time management and planning. But it's not about, get rid of everything and be a minimalist. It is about you having the things you need when you need them. You know where to find them. And for some of you, that means that if you put everything away, you have no freaking clue where it is. And now you've just spent 20 minutes wasting your time to look for the one thing you need. So you don't want to necessarily have piles of doom, because piles of doom mean you don't really know what's in that pile. But if you look at your desk, and although my desk isn't too bad right now, like I never show people my desk, because I have piles all the time. But at any point you say, where is, I can tell you exactly where it is. I can pull it out. And then, when I'm feeling really busy and I need to procrastinate, then I straighten up my desk. But it's one of those things that you need things accessible to you. So organization is about knowing what you need and where to get it when you need it. So do not let people make you feel bad about what your house looks like. Your level of organization, your level of chaos is what you are comfortable living with. And if they don't like it, don't come over.
I do sometimes wonder, though, because I do like going into a clean, fresh, tidy space. And I love that. And I find it very difficult to create those spaces for myself. So I'm in this place of, actually, I suppose, at least if I've got a leaning towards it, I might get closer to it than I would otherwise. But yes, I definitely have piles all over the place. And some of them are piles of doom. And some of them are exactly as you've said, actually. If somebody asks me, I can find it. So,
right.
Yeah.
And so like the piles of doom are not healthy, right? The piles of doom, because they make you feel bad, and you need to go through it and get rid of it. And so for those, like, you do need to have a system. You need to have a plan. Like, how am I going to declutter this? And so part of making your space functional is organizing it in a way that makes it work for you. And if you truly and if you really like that minimal, everything's in its place kind of life, that's fine. Cool. You need to find the systems that are going to help you maintain that. And if that means that you've got someone coming in your house once a week because you can afford it, then you have someone come in and take care of it for you. There is no shame in that. Right? I accepted many, many years ago when my children were small that I was never going to have that kind of house. And now my children are mostly grown. They're in college, Okay, so I'm not stepping on Legos and little people, but there's always a random laptop or a notebook or a book for class, or, there's always stuff laying around.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. Like, my house is not gross, it's not dirty, but there's always some level of clutter. Even though, like, we could totally clean everything and it looks, oh, it's so nice, it's beautiful. We know it's not going to stay that way.
Yeah.
So again, it's about accepting who you are and what your level of comfort is. And your level of comfort is going to be different than someone else's. And like I said, and if when you're like, oh, but I can't have people over, you know what? If they love you, they're not going to care. I mean, no, they don't want to sit down on a random cheeseburger on your couch, But if a dirty sock sitting on the floor is going to bother them, are they really a good friend? I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Organization is about finding what's comfortable for you. And then the last 3 skills, these are the ones that I said they're bigger in that they're more expansive and harder to kind of nail down. So one is working memory. That is kind of remembering what you need to remember in the moment so you can manipulate that information. And working memory, the rule is 7 plus or minus 2 is what science says. So like 7 plus 2 things or minus 2 things, depending on your brain. So basically between 5 and 9 things is what you should be able to hold in your working memory at any given time. Wow. And the problem that you have with ADHD people is that, so here's the thing. It's very confusing because when you hear attention deficit, people are like, oh, they can't pay attention. No, that's not, they pay attention to everything. So they're always like information, and they're trying to hold it all in their heads all the time. And so then your brain can only hold so much. So things start to fall out. Right. And you can't control what's going to fall out because your brain's like, no, but we need that, but we need that, but we need that. And so, yes, you will like walk out of the room and be like, oh, what did I come in here for? Oh, I don't remember, but there's a dirty dish. Let me go put the dirty dish away. Oh, wait, but what about the counter? And there's a counter. Oh, I forgot to pull that out for dinner. And you forgot the whole purpose of you walking into the kitchen to begin with was to just get a glass of water.
Yeah. Yes.
It sounds so like me.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yes. So
but actually, that's reassuring to know because some of it for me was right. Do I have I got a vitamin or mineral deficiency? Am I just old? Have I got dementia? There are times where, as you said, Shannyn, I've gone in to go and grab a notepad or a pen, and I've ended up, sorting out the ironing pile, which then has led to some things that need to go into the washing machine, which is, oh yeah, I forgot to pick up the post. And by the time I've recognized that actually it was the pen I needed, I've already done an hour's work on other stuff. Now, it's great that work got done, but it's like, that pen would have been a 10-second job, really.
Yes, that distractibility actually leads us right into the next one, which is attention. Attention is one of the executive function skills. So it's right there in the title of attention deficit, right? And like I said, it's not, I really hate that name because it's not a deficit. It really is like you notice everything. You're paying attention to everything. So when we talk about attention as an executive function skill, it's the ability to focus on specific information while filtering out the distractions by, being able to ignore the other things, being able to go grab that pen without getting distracted by the ironing. Right. Yes. And so for my ADHD people, that's the kind of thing that they beat themselves up for. Like, why can't I just pay attention? But you are paying attention. You're having a harder time filtering things.
Yes.
So coming up with strategies to help you filter, minimize those distractions. And then the last one is cognitive flexibility, which is like a super fancy word. So cognitive flexibility so we're talking about cognition, that's your brain. Flexibility, we know what flexibility is, right? It's being able to look at things a different way. So cognitive flexibility is when you are able to look at things from a new perspective, when you are able to adapt to unplanned changes or events or situations. I'm sure you know that, like, for a lot of people, like, they have their way of doing things, right? And it's got to be this way. And if it's not, then they freeze and they don't know what to do. Like, I have to do this before I can do this. Well, now what do I do? Because I can't do the first thing. Cognitive flexibility is about being able to do that. And it hits other things like perspective, like putting yourself in someone else's shoes, and empathy, and being able to look at things in different ways. So like those are the ways that we see it. And we're, for a lot of people, it ends up being a problem, but cognitive flexibility for a lot of ADHD people, it's the thinking outside the box. It's that random, really weird idea that everybody's like, what? But it's brilliant if they give it a minute. Just think about it, right? So absolutely, something like that is a superpower. The problem is that most neurotypical people don't want to listen. They just write you off as being silly, but it's like, no, just listen. It makes sense. The connections are there. They just jumped 5 steps ahead and the rest of you couldn't keep up. And once you backtrack those 5 steps, then they're like, oh, right. That's all cognitive flexibility. And being able to think of things in new ways.
This has been amazing, Shannyn. Thank you so much.
I'm so glad that you found it all helpful. And
there's so much more that we could find out. But I think to end, we should be finding out how people can contact you so that they can give you a follow or contact you and see what you can help them with, actually.
The easiest way to reach me is to check out my blog, which is fbombcoach.com. So it's EF, like executive function, fbombcoach.com. And from there, you can get the links to my Facebook group. You do have to be a woman to join the Facebook group. I will not let you in if you're a man. I'm not a man hater. I just want a safe space for women. But you can access all of my courses. And I do also have a membership, also only for women. I'm sorry, men, you can't come in, but you could buy my courses separately. Like, my members get all of my courses as part of the membership. But if you're a dude out there and you just want to learn about any of the executive function skills, you can, get a separate course and just buy the course and work your way through it. And that's all good.
Awesome.
Amazing. I have to say, I have so enjoyed this episode and I have learned so much from you. So thank you so much for your time today and the nuggets of learning and also the really practical tips. So yes, thank you. And thank you, listeners, for coming along on our curiosity about ADHD and running our businesses. And we would absolutely love it if you would please give us a follow and comment below with your questions or thoughts. And maybe send us a pic of your desk. And let's see what yours looks like. I'll share mine if you share yours. Thank you, Shannyn.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from her.
All the best.